What happens when a Ukrainian rocket crew has just 90 seconds to outsmart Russian radar before being wiped out? On July 2nd, 2025, a Vilka M team spotted a Russian Zoopark M1 counter-battery radar, and the clock started ticking. Russian MLRS were already moving toward their position as GPS jamming crippled their digital systems. The crew had two choices: abandon the strike or manually feed coordinates under fire. What did they risk, and why did their final decision turn 3,000 tons of ammunition into fireballs? Stay with this story to see the exact moment it all unfolded. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. How do you strike a target when your guidance system shuts down in the middle of a live battlefield? For the Vilka M artillery crew, that question wasn't a thought exercise. It became real as their hardened tablet blinked out, its display locking, the navigation grid freezing under the tight clamp of Russian GPS jamming. Inside the armored cabin, seconds vanished while the crew scrambled. Their digital system was supposed to cut through interference, cross-checking American GPS signals with Russian GLONASS, then syncing with the rocket's own inertial guidance. But interference saturated the airwaves so heavily, it smothered the device. In that moment, one of the most modern rocket systems Ukraine possessed looked like it had gone blind. The team knew exactly what was coming. As soon as the radar sweep detected their activation, Russian multiple launch rocket systems would begin narrowing in on firing positions. Every second wasted here would bring those hostile coordinates closer to accuracy. 40 seconds meant spotting time. Another 30 and targeting solutions would feed into their rockets. Delay too long and counter battery fire would arrive before they ever launched. The strike was one heartbeat away from being abandoned. A mission collapsed not by steel or shrapnel, but by static in the ether. Manual input was the only option left. Normally, this procedure was reserved for training simulations, or at best, controlled test conditions when soldiers had 5 or even 10 minutes to double-check values on paper. Doing it in live combat, while enemy systems closed in, was almost unheard of. It was slower, riskier, and demanded precise coordination under near-paralyzing pressure. But abandoning the mission only meant giving the Russians more time to shell Ukrainian forces elsewhere. The choice was obvious. The crew braced themselves, paper coordinates in hand, and started to type. Manually keying in launch data involves multiple layers of numbers: target range, azimuth, compensation for wind shear, then final corrections factoring in electronic interference. Normally, a 3-minute window was considered good time for this work. But in that cabin, with MLRS launchers awakening 38 kilometers away, 3 minutes might as well have been 3 hours. They carved the process down step by step, moving as though they were executing a drill they had rehearsed endlessly. Numbers shouted, cross-checked, punched into the panel. 90 seconds later, the launcher was primed. The strike was alive again. Technology gave them one small advantage. Each rocket carried multiple navigation redundancies, GPS and GLONASS when available, and an inertial navigation system when jamming overwhelmed satellite signals. Fiber optic gyroscopes, buried in the rocket's frame, recalibrated dozens of times per second, silently correcting flight paths through microscopic light refractions. These systems were never meant to stand alone for long durations, but in short-term strikes under heavy jamming, they brought crucial stability. Even as waves of electronic interference rolled through the battlefield, that inertial platform offered the chance for precision. Time pressure didn't loosen its grip. Radar signatures were already confirming hostile locks sweeping in arcs toward their firing sector. Every second prolonged the crew's exposure. Somewhere across the horizon, Russian operators watched screens narrowing on their coordinates, feeding launch cycles into multiple rocket batteries. 38 kilometers meant only a few minutes difference between decision and destruction. Yet here was a Ukrainian crew refusing to abandon, holding the line on a mission that could shift pressure across the battlefront. By forcing the strike forward despite electronic paralysis, the crew ensured the rockets would fly. The mission didn't end with silence from a tablet. Instead, it moved from survival to attack. The launcher's cage roared, the rockets leapt out, and fiery trails carved through the air. Now the problem wasn't keeping the coordinates alive, but watching how those missiles would survive Russia's layered air defense waiting ahead. What happens when a precision missile enters not one, but 3 layers of Russian air defense at once? The answer unfolded in a matter of seconds. 4 Vilka M rockets shimmered into the night sky in tight sequence, each leaving a trail of white-hot exhaust. The plumes lit up the horizon and burned across the blackness like flares. And within moments, air defense radar operators caught the signatures on their scopes. To them, the attack looked like a swarm, fast and coordinated, approaching too quickly to dismiss. The Russian defense layout tightened into action. 15 kilometers out, the TOR M2 engaged first. Its short-range missiles were built for the exact purpose of intercepting rockets like the Vilka. Launch trays shifted toward rising heat signatures, locks buzzing in the operator's ears. At the same time, deeper in the perimeter, Pantsir S-1 crews activated their fire control radars, preparing salvos of interceptor missiles backed by rapid-firing autocannons. On the edges of the complex, a Shilka anti-aircraft system stood ready, scanning the low horizon, bristling with quad barrels designed to throw walls of fire at anything that slipped through. Each defensive layer expected to cover the one behind it, in theory building a net thick enough that nothing penetrated. But theory rarely survives the chaos of combat. The air was already thick, with overlapping electromagnetic interference. The same electronic fog that jammed Ukrainian GPS also confused Russian scopes. Operators struggled as radar reflections merged into jagged streaks across displays. Heat signatures threw off false returns. Some missile locks slipped for brief moments, forcing manual calibration under extreme pressure. The very environment designed to blind incoming rockets was also harming the defenders tracking them. As the first interceptors streaked skyward, one Vilka M rocket snapped into a pre-programmed evasive maneuver. Its trajectory kinked, a sudden shift calculated into its software before launch. The intercept missile arced neatly toward where the rocket should have been, its seeker head chasing heat, but met empty sky instead. For the operators watching, the failed attempt was more than a miss. It was a reminder that this wasn't a blind barrage. The rockets they faced were adapting even mid-flight. The next missile came closer. A detonation lit up the sky barely 10 meters from a Vilka's nose cone. A thunderclap in the night. Shrapnel ripped past its casing, rattling its stabilizers, but not enough to bring it down. Russian crews watching the near hit gripped their consoles, knowing the margin for error had just been proven razor-thin. A second warhead slipped by in the same volley, forcing the Pantsir system to unleash its cannons at maximum rate, streams of tracers clawing desperately for contact. From the ground, the scene resembled madness. Autocannon fire stitched the air. Missiles slammed upward in overlapping tracks. Radar screens pulsed with scrambled returns, every image muddy. Heat decoys from the Vilkas only added to the confusion, bright points drifting slowly to pull seekers off course. Each second the rockets survived meant less time before steel and explosives reached their objective. Crews screamed adjustments, aimed hastily, and fired again. But defense is about perfection, and perfection under chaos is impossible. 3 rockets evaded every intercept attempt. The first impacted cleanly against the outer wall of the Russian ammunition depot. With a crack of concrete and steel, it tore open a storage chamber, stacked tight with shells and propellant. Less than a second later, a chain reaction began. Secondary explosions rolled upward, ripping through containers, igniting fuel, and sending shockwaves that thundered for kilometers. Within the span of a minute, the air battle in the skies had turned into catastrophe on the ground. 3,000 tons of munitions were gone, warehouses collapsed into smoking craters, and Russian artillery units nearby found themselves suddenly without resupply. For weeks, batteries that should have been firing every day would sit idle, their lifeline erased in one strike. This single gamble showed how precision under pressure can ripple far beyond one battlefield. Ukraine's ability to adapt quickly, even when technology falters, is altering how modern war is fought. So ask yourself, if one strike could starve Russian batteries for weeks, how many more like this could unravel the very logistics keeping wars in motion?